Bill O'Reilly is at it again. Now, while the war in Iraq rages halfway across the globe, and America's deadliest enemy, Al-Qaeda, is reportedly rearming to use arms against us, what does Bill O'Reilly spend night after night talking about? NBC News, of course. Now, on last night's show, Bill O'Reilly continued his jihad against this network for what he says is a sharp turn to the left. Take a look at Bill's latest smear, what he would call a smoking gun that he has pointed against NBC News.
More evidence that NBC News is now a committed left-wing organization. After Republican Mitt Romney announced he was running for president, NBC News correspondent Chip Reid trashed him.
He's barely out of the starting blocks, and I'm going to go right for his knee. Number one, he's a Mormon, and evangelicals have problems. Number two, he's a flip-flopper.
He's a flip-flopper. Now it's pretty hard to believe when you understand that Mr. Reid covers Congress for the NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. Nice objectivity.
Nice objectivity. Well, are Bill O'Reilly's attacks on NBC justified, or is the guy just obsessed? Here now to talk about it, MSNBC media analyst Steve Adevato and Bob Cohn. He's the author of the book, Journalistic Fraud. Bob, let's talk about the latest. Sure. Of course, he goes after Chip Reid, attacking Chip for suggesting that Mitt Romney may have flip-flopped on some social issues. Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, I actually have seen a lot of Chip Reid's programs, segments on NBC, and I find him to be a pretty objective and straightforward reporter. I don't really detect much bias in his news reporting. I think he made a mistake by going out and saying that, accusing Mitt Romney and stating that he's a flip-flopper. I think that's stating his opinion.
So you think Bill O'Reilly may have been right to say that Chip Reid was biased by accusing Mitt Romney of flip-flopping?
I think it's not a good idea for a straight news reporter that's on the nightly news giving straight reports every night, and he seems to be a straightforward reporter, up and up, to go on another program and start stating his opinions about some of the candidates. I just think that's just providing it reduces.
Okay, well, Steve, though, hold on a second, Steve, because I want us, and I certainly know Bill O'Reilly will be watching this. Bill, I want you to take a look at what Fox News chief political correspondent Carl Cameron said about Mitt Romney in December. Quote, on social issues like abortion, Romney calls himself pro-life. But during the 1990s, he was pro-choice, a flip-flop that conservatives say raises serious questions. Steve, I am shocked and stunned.
Well, you shouldn't be, because the fact that Mr. Romney, Governor Romney, is a Mormon is a fact. The fact that he's altered his position over time when he ran for a governor in a very liberal state, Massachusetts, and now he runs in a very conservative primary for the presidency in the Republican Party, he's changed his position. That's not a matter of opinion. That is a fact. He flip-flopped.
No.
And you don't need an analyst to say that,
No. He didn't say that he flip-flopped on the issue of abortion. He said he's a flip-flopper, okay? That was stating his opinion on it.
Flip-flopped on social issues.
You know, Bob, that's a technicality, Bob, and you know it. Listen, if O'Reilly is going to hinge his entire argument that NBC is leaning to the left over this technicality, it's not going to work.
Well, I don't think he's hinging his entire argument on it. He's got accumulated a tremendous amount of facts against NBC.
They're all weak arguments.
Let's look at another one. Hold on. Let's look at another one of his facts. He also targeted MSNBC's Contessa Brewer. Let's take a look at this attack.
Also on NBC News, Amanda Marcotte, the anti-Christian blogger who was fired from the John Edwards campaign, was given the softball treatment by Contessa Brewer.
Amanda, it's great to talk to you today. By the way, what are you going to do for a job now?
Hopefully go into writing, since that's what I was hired for and have been doing for a long time now.
All right. During that interview, Ms. Marcotte, who wrote that Mary, the mother of Jesus, had sex with the quote-unquote Lord, portrayed herself as a victim in front of the sympathetic NBC News interviewer.
Joe, this is
sympathetic. That's laughable. O'Reilly cherry-picked that one question from the end of Contessa's interview. I want to show you some of the questions he didn't show his audience.
They were calling for Edwards to fire you. Instead, you resigned. Can you tell me why? This has gotten a lot of attention for former Senator John Edwards. Do you feel bad about what you wrote just because of the impact that it's had on him? You posted on a blog speculating what would have happened if the Virgin Mary had taken an emergency contraceptive. Were you wrong in what you wrote?
Bob, I mean,
well,
it's
you know,
O'Reilly looks silly.
There's a lot of hey, Joe. There's a lot of selective editing going on around today, and you just showed one example. Right after that interview, right after O'Reilly showed that, he had two analysts on. One was a liberal and one was a conservative, and they both discussed that. What's wrong with that? I mean, I don't particularly think that was a particularly egregious example. I would agree with you. But, you know, the accumulation over time, in the latest report that NBC Nightly News...
Doesn't that show he's obsessed?
No.
I mean, the guy is obsessed with NBC.
No, he was
Takes
obsessed.
Contessa Brewer at the end of a tough interview.
What's obsessed with it? He was
nice.
He was going after the New York Times a couple of years ago.
Forget about
now
the New
he's
York
going
Times.
after NBC.
He's done with that. Joe,
he's going to go after somebody else. He's a media watchdog. What's the problem
Bob,
with that?
here's the problem with your argument. So far, there are 2 points that have been raised tonight that O'Reilly raised. The first one, on Chip, it was a weak argument. I was there in the studio with Contessa as she was doing that interview. I was doing the next segment with her. It is so far out of context to take the end of the interview, as Joe Scarborough said. You saw everything he did. This is a weak argument, too.
You know what's ridiculous here?
Where's the cumulative argument that he's making?
Well, you've been watching his show. You've been putting on these examples night after night. But here's the ridiculous thing here. I mean, the Fox News Channel has like 10 times the ratings as MSNBC, yet this network is trying to tell Bill O'Reilly what he should be producing and saying on his show.
I don't think that's
the irony.
No,
That's
we're
incredible.
Not.
Of course you are. You're criticizing.
And of course, you know what's so fascinating is, you know, Bill O'Reilly goes after NBC Nightly News, and you were about to do the same thing. My God, what do they have?
Well,
20 times the audience of Bill O'Reilly?
He's not telling you.
Is it just about how many people watch his show?
He's not telling you what to program. Like you're trying to tell him what to program. He's telling you if you do program, do it straight.
You know what I'm
That's
telling
what
him?
he's saying.
I'm telling him that we have important issues to talk about across the globe. If you look at our show every night, we talk about Iraq. We talk about Iran at the top. We talked about nuclear proliferation last night. We talk about the coming war with Iran. We talk about Pakistan.
He doesn't.
Take a look at Bill O'Reilly's show just over the past week. Let's see how much time he's devoting to this NBC jihad as opposed to, say, an important story like the war in Iraq. We counted a total of 47 references and attacks to NBC, dwarfing the 20 times he mentioned Iraq.
So you're trying to tell him...
But hold on a second. It gets worse. Some further digging shows that 11 of those Iraq references were during segments where he was bashing NBC.
You're trying to tell him how to program his show. He's trying to tell you to be straight down the middle.
This guy is being self-righteous. You know what I'm saying? It's biblical, really. Before you look at the plank in our eyes, you know, check the plank out in your own eyes, Bill O'Reilly. Stop being self-righteous.
Hey, Joe,
so the Nightly News appoints Keith O'Reilly. The Nightly News now appoints Keith Olbermann, that liberal nutcase that you have going on before your show, to go on the Nightly News to give commentary. Why don't they put Ann Coulter on the Nightly News?
So that's what this comes down to.
Hold on. Stop for a second. Has it come down to the fact now that your news analysis calls somebody on our network a nut job? What does he have to do with Bill O'Reilly obsessing over NBC Nightly
I think
News?
Olbermann is calling O'Reilly a lot worse than that.
News.
Joe, let me try to answer that. This is about Keith Olbermann. This is about the fact that O'Reilly may have greater ratings, but he is frustrated by Olbermann. He doesn't go after Olbermann. You ever notice that? He doesn't talk about him.
Why is he frustrated?
Joe, 1 second, Bob.
What?
1 second. And he also doesn't mention you, Joe. You know why? Because you have credentials as a Republican conservative in Congress.
Because
he doesn't mention what? He's got 5 times the audience at Olbermann. He's not worried about Olbermann at all. It's NBC who wants to put Olbermann on the Nightly News.
Yeah, he's doing a public service, Bob.
He is obsessed
why is Zucker or whoever at NBC, why are they putting Olbermann, a real liberal, a devout liberal, as a commentator on the Nightly News? Why are you guys doing that if you're not left-wing? Give me a break.
Hold on. What about the person he's right up against? What about Joe Scarborough? Is he a devout what? He is a devout conservative.
At least,
wait a minute.
At least put Joe Scarborough on the Nightly News. Why are they putting Olbermann on?
Well,
that's ridiculous.
Let me tell you something. I've been on the Today Show repeatedly. The Today Show has a much larger audience, I think, than any other news show on NBC. So, I mean, then we have conservatives.
You're a drop in the bucket compared to the liberal Matt Lauer and Katie Couric when she was there?
The
You can't
liberal
make
Matt
up.
Lauer,
You
give
can't
me
make
a
up.
break. And by the way, Katie Couric, she's at CBS now, so you're going to have to take that up with Moonves. All right, we got to go. Bob, I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
The last word. I think there is something going on at NBC. Last week, Brian Williams lost against Charlie Gibson on ABC. So they're losing share because they're going as liberal as Katie Couric.
Yeah.
Katie Couric's in the toilet on ratings, and Brian Williams is losing it too. That's what's going on here.
As we say in the South, even a blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while. How many weeks do you have to be at number one? I mean, it's got to be boring for Brian after a while. Thank you, Bob Cohn. Thank you, Steve. Greatly appreciate it. Coming up